A once familiar sight on the salt marshes or La Prée in this area as well as the Annapolis Valley, haystacks were a vital food source for the cattle of the Acadians who settled here. An article in the Argyle Municipality Historical and Genealogical Society's newsletter, The Argus, notes one of the greatest advantages of these marshes to the original settlers was the fact that they provided ready fodder for their cattle. The clearing of land and cultivation of upland hay was engaged in almost immediately, but the marsh hay meant that the cattle would not starve waiting for the harvest for the first crops. Communities that built up around these marshes include Argyle, Argyle Head, Roberts Island, Chebogue, and Chigogan, to name a few. In its heyday, one might see as many as 1,000 of these haystacks on the marshes in places like Amirault Hill and Hubbard's Point. Acadian farmers needed to be able to effectively store the harvested salt hay outside and retrieve it when needed. An additional challenge, of course, was that being a marsh, highly seasonal tides as well as those driven higher by storms and winds meant that the hay could not be stored on the ground. The solution was to construct a straddle, or a chafoux or carré in French. A straddle was essentially a raised platform with a grid of timbers for its base. At 3 feet off the ground, it held the harvest well clear of the tides, and the timber grid floor allowed air to pass through and water to drain from the hay. A skilled scythe cutter could cut up to 4 tons of hay in a single day. A single straddle could hold as much as a ton of scythe cut and carefully stacked hay. It could take from 2 to 3 hours to fully stack the barge. The arrangement of the hay in the stack by the person working it at the top was critical to ensure that the stack both held together and allowed precipitation to run off. Loaded by means of long hay poles, once completed, the stacker's final trick was to get off the barge without damaging it. This was facilitated by a bit of gymnastics. The stacker would climb, head first, down a long hay pole that had been laid against the stack until he was close enough to the ground to be able to swing his body around and land on his feet. A tribute to the ingenuity of the makers, a straddle could last as long as 3 generations, with a farmer sometimes not needing to build one in his lifetime. While the hay was drying off the ground, the farmer could not access it for his animals until the ground froze, because the wheels of their wagon and the oxen or horses' hooves would sink into the soft marsh. Gradually, the practice of stacking the hay faded, as modern machinery made it possible to harvest the hay more quickly. Then, in the late 1990s, a local group of interested individuals decided to build a straddle and stack, which has now become an annual event each summer, known as the Festival de la Barge. A final note regarding salt hay versus upland hay. It is said in these parts that when you feed your animals salt hay, they will not gain weight, but they also never get sick.